Hey guys, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Rebecca.
And this is the Faith Found Sisters podcast. And today we are
discussing Proverbs 11.
So go ahead and read Proverbs 11 and come back for the discussion. So would you like to go and get started?
Yes. In verses 1 through 9, I found that what the righteous do, God sees and God blesses. But what we do, like sinning, like they mention here, that lying and pride and people that are just trying to sin they're gonna fail. They're not gonna reach that goal that the righteous will, because God will bless the righteous. He will help them get to their goal. But those who seek their own way of getting to the goal will not get to the goal. And with God's help, we can obtain His will quicker. And that's what I found through those verses.
Mm-hmm. Because, a righteous person not only follows the Lord, but he seeks His will constantly, because he's following the Lord and he's doing what the Lord commands. But there's always going to be some uncertainty in the future, and that's why we have to look to God for it. So that's why it's really important to stay away from sin, and when you're tempted, to call out the Lord for help, because He'll hear you and He'll answer your call. Because God always answers. It may not be what we want, but God is always answering. So it's important to stay in His will and to follow Him for what He has to say. And then moving on to the verses 12 through 21, it's talking about the balance of right and wrong and how important that is to God. God favors the righteous because they're His people. They were the right ones. And that's why it's really important to have that balance, because now that we have a sin nature, we have to understand that there's always going to be sin until God makes the earth perfect again. But for now, we have to have that balance of sin and good. We always hope that the good outweighs the bad, but not everyone is perfect, and you have to have that balance of, I'm a Christian, I'm going to do right, but I'm not ignorant. I'm not ignorant, and I know that sin will still tempt me. It's just the importance of knowing that, yes, it's still there, but I have to call it to God, that God's going to be there for me.
Yeah. The things that we do that seem good and seem nice to other people, those are not going to get us to heaven, though.
Yeah.
It will help us when we're saved. It will help us to grow in God and help others to see God in our lives. But it's not going to help us get there. Only by faith in Jesus are we ever going to have that. But doing right things as a Christian is always important, and it always builds a strong foundation on God, and will be less likely to falter or fail as if someone who was weaker in God.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw in some of those same verses that, again, He says that He's going to bless the righteous, and that the righteous know how to speak. Because sometimes our mouths, they can say corrupt things. They can say things that might offend or dissuade somebody from getting the gospel. And personally with my life, and I know with many of y'all out there, that we have a hard time speaking. Sometimes we can just snap it off like this. Like somebody could say a comment on here and say something mean about it. And maybe they do mean it, but and if I were to respond in anger against that comment, that would not be right. As well as a conversation with a friend, that would not be right to just go back in anger. So the righteous know how to respond, and they know how to respond right. And our words should be used to glorify God, not to glorify ourselves.
Okay, to go along with what she said, some things do cause us to be angry, and, we can have a righteous anger, but it's important to know that, not all anger is good, and that certain things can lead to anger. I know in some of the later verses, it talks about, like, blessings and money and how that affects us now. Riches isn't all that's here in life. Money is not a bad thing in and of itself. It is the love of money that is wrong. It is the love of money that causes us to sin and to be in the wrong. That's why it's really important to have an understanding of what money is and the proper way to use it. Because with Ananias and Sapphira, if you know their story, if they hadn't lied when giving the money, God wouldn't have had to condemn them. If they said, we sold our property, but we're giving you part of the money, instead of saying this is all, God would not have condemned them for saying this is only part of the money. If we do things in the right spirit, if we're tithing and giving in the right spirit, then there's nothing wrong with that. So when we refuse to tithe and we don't give off our first fruits, that's when we have a misunderstanding of how things are. But Christians also have to know that we have riches in heaven. As a Christian, when we're doing the work of God, we have promised riches in heaven. Our riches don't only last here on earth. And it's important to know that, yes, we may have money here, but what matters is eternity and what we have in eternity.
Yeah, and to go along with the anger, my youth pastor just said this, that emotions aren't bad. It's what we do with our emotions. It's the consequences and the actions that go along with it. Like anger, if I were to hit somebody or some wrong action against it, that would be a wrong anger. But if I get angry and I give God my anger, it is not a bad anger. It is a good anger that God will funnel and God will protect me, and I am not sinning. I am giving God my anger and letting Him use it the way He needs to use it instead of using it the way I would use it, and then I would corrupt it. Because God gave us these emotions. Like, He has all the emotions that we have. He has anger, He has sadness, joy, and love. He has all of those. And so we use these because He gave them to us. He wants us to be like Him in every way. So the emotions themselves are not wrong, but the way we use them are. And then, so a gracious woman, she is a pleasant woman. She is someone you would want to be around. And this woman who is pleasant, who seeks God's will, is going to be able to have honor of other people and of herself. She's going to think highly of herself because she thinks highly of God and does things that God would be pleased of. Yeah. So for all the girls out there, and even for men, we need to be gracious. We need to be kind and pleasant to other people because God respects that. And if God respects that, you're respected by a lot of people. Because God shows His blessings in different ways, but He always when we humble ourselves, we always are exalted. So that's what I found in those.
Yeah, and just with wrapping everything up, it's really important to know that being gracious and not being prideful, all these things are for eternity. They're for eternal blessings, and that's why it's really important to understand that we need to be gracious people, that we don't need to be prideful. We need to stay in God's will, and it says it in the last verses that the righteous shall be recompensed in the earth much more than the wicked and the sinner. God will always bless the righteous, so it's important to be righteous and to stay that way.
Yes. I think that's everything. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Next week we'll be doing Proverbs 12. Hope to see you next time. Bye.
Bye.